Amongst the traitor legions that plague humanity, few have achieved such perfection as the Emperor's children. Blessed by Slaanesh, these Chaos Space Marines possess the most outlandish mutations and surgical alterations that have helped their many warbands cause unprecedented violence throughout the galaxy. But before the Emperor's children followed their Primarch into damnation and betrayed the Imperium they fought so valiantly to create, they were a noble and honorable Astartes legion. At the end of the Unification War, when the Emperor of Mankind set his sights on the countless fractured human empires in the Milky Way galaxy, the Third Legion, which would later earn the title of the Emperor's Children, were at the forefront of the initial wars of unification. Their initial recruits were drawn from the courts and blood-vassal populations of Europa. The Emperor demanded the noble families send their finest youth as tribute after their territories were conquered by the Emperor's initial imperial army. Many of these recruits were grudgingly given over as penance rather than tribute, viewing the Emperor as a hostage-taker, forcing his hand over the newly oppressed populations, an ideology that would later be dealt with. There were some families, however, that saw the value and necessity of the Great Crusade, and willingly gave their sons away to the Third Legion. In their minds was a desire to see the Imperium of Man grow, and the imperial truth spread throughout the ancient human civilization. One of these noble houses was House Loyalist, who sent all of its sons to be transformed into Astartes at the time of their capitulation to imperial rule, but would later commit to giving over their firstborn sons for each generation thereafter. It was the royal and aristocratic blood of these neophytes that stretched back through the long history of humanity's ancient past, which mixed so well with the gene seed of their Primarch Fulgrim. Each new Astartes strove for perfection and fought with an intense desire to honor their past. Natural-born leaders, the battle brothers of this legion, acted as commanders of the developing imperial army. The legion felt drawn to these roles, and by marching into battle alongside their human shock troops, they carried on the long traditions of Terra's military aristocracy. It was actually the Emperor's children that sculpted and strategized the Antarctic clearance campaign during the Unification War. It was the Third Legion's superb guidance that led to its successful completion. The Emperor's children showcased their incredible ability to execute and exceed the intent and expectations of their Emperor in war zones all across the Unification War and the early days of the Great Crusade. It seemed that the Legion truly wanted to prove themselves worthy of being part of the Emperor's army. In their mind, the Emperor represented the pinnacle of humanity, and only by following his example was it possible to attain one's fullest potential. However, they believed normal humans could only emulate the perfection of the Astarte, and were ultimately inferior to the Space Marines. Only an Astarte could achieve perfection through dedication to the Emperor. Proof of the Legion's willingness to sacrifice itself for the Emperor is showcased during the Proximal Rebellion. After this world capitulated to the might of the Imperium of Man, the typical Imperial compliance ceremonies were held, and the Emperor assigned the Third Legion as his honor guard, along with the Adeptus Custodes. Unfortunately, the planet's surrender was simply a lie, and thousands of scheming insurrectionists were hidden amongst the crowded population. Their trap worked, as they unleashed vortex fire upon the Imperials, wounding the Emperor of Mankind and assaulting his honor guard, intent on butchering all of the invaders. The Third Legion cohort fought ferociously to protect their great leader. They stood their ground until the last man was brought down, but by then, the Emperor had enough time to recover and fought his way clear of the ambush. In honor of their sacrifice, the Emperor's children were given the right to eradicate the dishonorable rebels by enacting exterminatus and getting vengeance for their cohort's destruction. As the rebellious world burned beneath the might of the crusading fleet, the Emperor bestowed the standard of the Palatine Aquila to the Third Legion. They were the first and only legion given this honor during the Great Crusade. They proudly displayed the Palatine Aquila on their heraldry, which signified not only that they belonged to the Imperium of Man, but proof of their loyalty to the Emperor as a master of mankind. They became a vital part of diplomatic missions and primary representatives of the Imperium's might during the compliance actions. The simple sight of the Emperor's symbol carried by one of his favorite warriors was enough to keep many new allies or recently conquered worlds in line. The Legion also took on the color purple to showcase their mark of rank, and so that none could doubt that these Astartes were the chosen ones. For a time, the Emperor's children were the messengers of the Emperor, instructing other legions and expeditionary fleets on the wishes of the Master of Mankind. Trusted to maintain the purity of the Emperor's word, the Third Legion took on the mandate of the Emperor's will. Unfortunately for the Legion, a solar year after the Proximal Rebellion, a possible cult on Luna nearly destroyed the entire gene seed stock of the Emperor's children. Luna had been brought into the Imperial fold because the Emperor needed the moon's advanced knowledge of genetic manipulation that already existed prior to the Great Crusade. Using their sophisticated gene labs and aided by the Selena gene cults there, the Imperium was able to produce and equip new Space Marines at an unprecedented rate. But before the 3rd Legion's gene seed was transported to Terra's moon, it was destroyed by a hijacked defense laser, operated by a resistance group of Selenite cultists that refused to accept the Imperial truth. This catastrophe was not only devastating to the 3rd Legion, but also the Imperium as a whole. Luckily, a few gene seed reserves had been kept in the gene laboratories on Terra, but the successful and critical Separatist assault had to be concealed by the Imperium. Some reports stated that the transport crashed by accident, others simply say that it vanished. Imperial Biomagi of the Mechanicus understood that rebuilding this gene seed stock back to its original amount would be difficult, but not impossible. Unfortunately, yet another tragedy struck, when an outburst of viral blight broke out in the gene seed vaults of Terra. The Mechanicus tasked with safeguarding this gene seed tried the best they could to hold the virus in check, but this artificial alien blight was impervious to treatment, until finally the Emperor discovered a way to destroy the infection, but by then the 3rd Legion's gene seed was completely gone. Without gene seed stock and their Primarch still lost, the Emperor's children would have to resort to replacing their losses through progenitor gland collection from their dad. The Legion would eventually die if they didn't discover their Primarch soon. Without a doubt, losing the 3rd Legion would have been devastating for the Imperium. The Emperor's children were paragons of martial excellence. They scored those who did not meet their own perhaps unattainable standards. Their methods of waging war were pure perfection, as actual strategic planning met flawless execution. There were some within the Imperial army that called them arrogant and vainglorious, but the Legion's warriors were always ready to answer any such slight with blood. Blood duels became a fundamental part not only of their training, but also of their psychology. The duel was the ultimate expression of a warrior's skill and prowess, a mirror which reflected his essence. The weapons they used to duel with were a key part of their culture. It spoke of their aesthetic appreciation. Many of the Emperor's children bore swords crafted by the bladesmiths of 1,000 worlds. Among these, the carnival sabers of the old Terran traditions were a particular mark of quality within the Legion. Forged to ancient rituals and alchemaic formulas, each blade was a unique product of a master swordsman. The habit of taking strong weapons from defeated enemies was a strong characteristic throughout the Legion. If a renowned swordsman encountered a weapon of surpassing quality in the hands of an enemy, he would take it as a trophy. The swordman would then practice with that trophy weapon until he wielded it with more skills than the original wielder. This act represented the almost cannibalistic ritual intended to absorb and defeat the enemy in spirit. The quest for perfection consumed the Emperor's children both in body and spirit. For some it was not enough to achieve the accolades of perfection. They thirsted to embody that perfection. For these warriors, it was not enough that the Emperor had crafted their flesh and shaped each with the insight and knowledge no other could rival. Their granted transhuman state was simply the beginning of an unfinished path. It was reported that the 3rd Legion accepted nothing less than perfection in all of its endeavors, and worked ceaselessly to perfect its military operations. Each and every Space Marine trained every waking hour for their assigned task, whether it be a foot soldier, driver, gunner, scout, or even a sniper. Every aspect of battle was analyzed and used to their advantage, from terrain and weather to deployment and reserves. Nothing was left to chance. In combat, the Emperor's children were as brave as any Space Marine who ever lived, sustained not merely by an example of their peers, but by a deep individual belief in their duty. They fought to the best of their abilities in all conditions, whether the battle was a massive planetary assault or a simple patrol. It was widely believed that no Space Marine of the Emperor's children had ever been routed in battle. Similarly, the 3rd Legion was highly demanding of the forces they allied with. Any sign of hesitation or inefficiency in the Imperial Army units serving alongside the Legion, or even amongst their battle brothers, was not tolerated. The main guiding principle of the Legion was to lead by example, which was ingrained in every single fiber of the Emperor's children. They had little patience for any other regime. If the Emperor's children would have remained loyal during the Horus Heresy, their intense drive for perfection would have made them one of the Imperium's most flawless chapters. Rumors exist that many chapters share the Emperor's children ideology and martial prowess, such as the Death Eagles, but all assumptions that they are a descendant of the traitor Legion are considered heretical. If you wanted to create your own homebrew successor chapter of the Emperor's children, I think it would be really easy just because they specialize in everything. They try to perfect every aspect of warfare within their legion, so it makes sense that a successor chapter would try to do the same. You're not tied down to a certain battlefield role. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Oh, refuse to put my freedom first in any situation.